Well, hello, beautiful artisans out there on YouTube. Welcome to my channel. I'm so happy to have you today. I am so happy to do this little impromptu video, just answering a question. I love to get questions like this. And because they're the type of question that so many people are asking, but they don't ask. They just kind of give up on the project or they decide to do a different method. So this is the question. It is, how do I make my ruffles not floppy? So there's a lot of different factors involved here that could be making the ruffles floppy. But I want to show you, before we even begin, I want to preface this with some of my ruffles. And I'm going to be showing you on some hand warmers and foot warmers because these are the ones that I have currently, because I had made these this past winter for an arts and craft fair. And the ruffles do go. People do love them, especially on the hand warmers. Now, this hat I had made a number of years ago, maybe about 5 years ago. It's an adorable little hat with ruffles. It has just the right amount of ruffles. Now, this is just the basics. And my experience, based on my experience, if you make your ruffles too long, they are going to slant a bit. Now, there is a method out there, like the baseball caps, where people will crochet around cardboard. And because they want the ruffles up a little and this and that. There's different methods that you can do. I don't do that method, so I'm not really familiar enough with it. What I do is I make the ruffles, and I want my ruffles to be ruffled. I want them to have some kind of a ridge, some kind of a firmness to them. So when you put the hat on, now I don't have any of my styrofoam models with me. They're all in the store, in the gallery. So I'm going to put this down like this and just use this jar. So you can see here that these ruffles come to a very they're adorable. Let me put it that way. Like, this would be the face of in this case, this is a kid hat, so this would be the face of the child, and these come just above the eyebrows there, and it's perfect. It's adorable. Now, if I added more ruffles to this, it would not be very, it would lose its effect. So now, a couple of things. Ruffles get their firmness, or let me give you the concept of ruffles before I show you these. The concept is, for lack of a better way of explaining it, they are clustered, they are tight. You've got to get what you would call like a snugness or an excessive amount of stitches in a stitch that you normally wouldn't do. But that's what starts creating the ruffles. That's how I do it. That's how I learned it many, many years ago. So here I'm using a double crochet or treble. I think I did a treble here because I wanted them a little longer and I didn't want to do row after row. I didn't want to do any more rows. Now, with that said, if you did another row, you could get a little bit more firmness, but it would take an awful lot of work because now you're going to be focusing on each stitch to have excessive stitches, and that to continue your ruffling effect. Because if you don't do that, and you go from like this stitch to this stitch, you'll lose some of those ruffles, or you could anyway, depending what you're doing. So the number of rows make a difference, the yarn makes a difference, and the size of your crochet hook make a difference. Now, with all of that said, I want to share with you what I went through, a little bit of my process, and then together we'll make some ruffles with this little sample hat. So this past winter, I was making, somebody had asked me to make some foot warmers. So I was playing around with the design. It took me 4 days to come up with a design that I want that was granny square. Somebody was asking for granny square foot warmers. So the heel goes through here beautifully. This is really adorable. This is a soft yarn, and I wanted to put little ruffles. Now these ruffles in particular, well, let me just say it this way. This is a ruffle effect. I'll show you the ruffles in a minute. This is a ruffle effect. And you're like, well, what the heck do you mean it's a ruffle effect? What it is chain 5, and then I bring it back in the same chain I started in. And then I do chain 5 in the same thing, and the next one, and the next one, next one. So I am making them very close to each other, and I'm not spacing it so they're kind of loopy. I'm bringing it back so that you kind of get that little ripply effect. That's a ruffling effect. So that's one way you can do ruffles. Now, mind you, and this is the hand warmer, and I'm just going to show you this one. I'll show you a couple. It took me probably a half a dozen different tries, and I know how to do granny squares. Are super easy, but it took me about a half a dozen tries before I got this correct, because I wanted the ruffle effect, and I wanted it to and people loved these at the fair. They loved it. So, but if you look at the ruffles here also, those are the same thing. Chain, and then bring it, connect it, and then chain, connect it, chain, connect it. So now I'm going to show you, this one is double crochet. This is 2 double crochets here, and it's kind of a little roughly effect. And then at the edges here, I did what I did here, what you saw here, chains. So I just did 1 row of the double crochets in there, making it just a little snug. Now, the reason I didn't want to play around with this too much in tightness and on the edge there is because it had taken me an awful lot to figure out how to do this. And I wanted to stay consistent with my double crochets. So I got up here and I said, okay, the little chains going around are perfect. So the key and the concept is not spacing, but using excessive stitches or more stitches than you would normally use in your space stitch. So with that said, let's see here. So this hat, if we take a closer look at it, you can see that I stayed consistent with my trebles as I went through. I didn't change anything, and I didn't add any chains. So there's no spaces. And guess what? I could tell right away if I had my ruffle effect. And you can see it. You can see it right away there. So that was just fine for me. I thought that was adorable. And so now with that, so I guess what I'm saying is, unless you have a very specific pattern that you're trying to follow, I would say it's perfectly normal to be testing out the yarn that you're using, because it does make a difference with what the type of ruffle you're trying to get, or the effect, the size hook, and the stitch. So all of these, for me, like I said, I it's not unusual when I'm creating, especially with crochet. If I start thinking of something I really want, it will take me about easily 4 tries. It's usually on the 4th try. Sometimes it's maybe up to 6, but really it is that range. Over the years, it's always been. But anyway, with that, hopefully this doesn't knot up on me. Um, I I picked a lighter color yarn so that you can see easily, and with this hat. So I'm going to put this down and I'm going to show you what I mean. First, let's point out the spaces. This is a stitch space. That's a stitch space. This is my next stitch space. This is my next. Now, some people can and do, and it's okay. But if you use, let's say you go into your stitch like that and use that as your stitch space, you can do that. Now, with the ruffles, I like to use this inner stitch space just because it gives me more of a base. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead, and this is what I'm going to do. Let's do, well, first we're going to do 3, chain 3, because what I want to do is some double crochets. So I'm going to do 5 double crochets in this 1 stitch space. And I'm doing it that way because I'm testing out the snugness. I'm testing out, is this going to be too many in here? But I'm thinking off the top of my head, that's about, with my experience, I'm thinking that's about what I need to at least start with, because I need excessive amounts in here. As for lack of a better word, when it bunches up with the next set we're going to do, I'm not doing any chain, but when it bunches, that's when you start seeing your ruffles. Those are your ruffles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, that is here, I'm going to pull this out. That's absolutely ruffling. That's ruffling. Okay, so now I'm going to do this a couple of more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know that having this firm is definitely something that you want. And now with ruffles are usually only a couple of rows. Now, having said that, I guess you could put ruffles on a blanket. You know, you could be making a granny square blanket and you want ruffles all around it. And you're like, well, so that, on that type of item, let's say, on that type of product you're making, those, you can play around with the ruffles being longer, and because it's a blanket, right? But if you're doing a hat, which this is what the question was about, you're doing a hat, and you want these ruffles to stand a bit, then you definitely want to make sure that you're getting a firmness with your yarn. Now, there's a couple ways to get a firmness with your yarn. This is totally adorable. This is starting to ruffle. You can see that. And it's standing. So this is a baby hat, so we'll put it here. Look, that's standing. Now, if I go ahead and add another row going around, it the weight of that second row, especially with having 5 double crochets in 1 stitch, first of all, it's going to take you, it will take you some time because now you've got many stitches. So on that second row, you'd have to figure out, well, am I able to skip a few stitches and still get my effect? So that'd be a little test, trial and test, which is fine. I mean, that's like totally. But if you look at it like this is firm. Now, a couple of ways to get that firmness. The thicker the wool, I'm sorry, like if you use a thick yarn, and let's say typically with this yarn, you would use a J or a K hook, bring it down a couple sizes. And because then you're making your stitch tighter. And with a thicker yarn, a tighter stitch is going to be firmer. It just is. So if you're using a very thin yarn, let's say you're using a baby yarn that's soft and thin, you are going to have a very hard time having that stand. Now, in that case, you could do test and trial of doubling up the yarn or tripling that type of thin yarn and making sure you're doing excessive stitches of whatever you're doing going around and no chains. And most likely, I bet you that would work. But I'm not sure if that's the type of hat you're working with or not. So anyway, I hope that helps. And I love these questions. If you have more questions, keep them coming. Experimenting is a wonderful way to figure out, to kind of test out your ruffles. And like I've shown you a few different ways here to get the ruffle effect, and they're just really gorgeous. And like even this one, I love this one right here. And that's a little foot warmer. That's what those are. And this is soft, but it's a medium weight yarn. So it worked absolutely beautifully. So with that, I hope it answers your question. Test it out. Let me know. And if it doesn't, we can do a little bit more research, and I can pull out some of my books and see what I find. But with that, you have a beautiful day.